Hey YouTubers, welcome back. Today we're going to be pre-finishing some trim, and I'm just going to show you how to paint long strips of material when you don't have a bench or anything solid to put them on. The situation might not come up too often. Helps us to have these things in our bag of tricks, so to speak. So let's just get right into the demonstration. So this is the situation we find ourselves in. We have a whole bunch of narrow strips of trim that we have to paint. And this stuff has to be sanded, so it's just sitting in a pile. But for demonstration purposes, I left this one piece of doorstop material. It's about 1/4 of an inch thick, and you can see that it's a good 14 feet long. And ordinarily we're painting this kind of thing when it's already installed, but we have a chance to pre-finish this material. So how do we go about painting this so we don't make a royal mess? The product still looks good on the material. Well, I'll show you how I go about it. Now I have our oil-based primer in a bucket. We got this wide mouth handy pail, and I'm using a 2.5 inch sash brush. And this is a utility brush, really. You could use a high quality brush, but we're just going to use this for the duration of this priming job. So as I said, it's an oil based primer, and I'm using that because even though the trim is made with poplar, which doesn't have too much knots or sap streaks coming through the wood, as we go along you may see some marks in the wood that are dark, and even though the knots and the streaky areas in the wood, or the grain in the wood, might not be as sappy as pine, we still want to try to seal it the best we can. So we're using this oil-based primer. So what I'd like to do is we start off, we load up our brush, and we're going to paint about 1 foot or so. And we just paint the wide part of the face of the trim. But we also have to paint these narrow edges. So just do the one side, flip your material, do the other side, make sure there's no build up on the edges, and then just flare out, give that one final stroke. So from then on, we hold the material on the dry side, and we just do the same thing. We get our paint down on the top, more primer, but it would be the same when we paint this out. Paint that narrow edge, turn it over, paint this narrow edge. Make sure the material is covered and sealed, and then we just do a final brush out on the top. And we'll do it again to demonstrate. We can move our wood along here. So we load up our brush, start about 6 inches or so away from where we left off, spread the paint out on top, do our edge, make sure it's covered completely with product, do the other edge, and now at the same time we can check where we were. Make sure there's no build up on these edges, and then do a final, and then you just work your way along. Oh, here's an example of the type of blemish that you can get when you're using real wood trim. Now while that may or not be sappy, it's certainly a dark area. So we want to try to seal that off. So we're using a product called Cover Stain by Zinsser, which is an oil-based primer. And I know I generally don't like to use oil, but when we're using wood products that haven't been pre-primed, then I would prime it with an oil-based primer to try to seal these kind of blemishes off and reduce the chances of having any problems with knots and grain coming through on our finished paint. So this only took a couple of minutes to paint out, even though it might look like we have a lot of material to go through when it's in a pile. It really doesn't take too long. But what we're trying to accomplish is complete coverage on the edges without having a build-up on the face edge. So it needs to be covered, it needs to be sealed or primed, but we don't want to have a big excess of build-up on the outside edges. So you can see that that'll dry nicely, it'll soak into the wood, and then we can hand sand that and put a first finish coat on, and that'll be ready to install.